What's up YouTube? Welcome to Cars, Costs, and Technology. Today I want to talk to you guys about 5 features that really need to be on the next generation Corvette or the C8 Mid-engine Corvette when it is finally released. At this point in time, I'm not sure if it's going to be a 2019 model year, 2020 model year, or even later. Based on the leaked images and the articles that I've read, it looks like it's pretty far into the research and development process, but it's not quite ready for production yet. So before we get started, I do want to point out that I'm not going to be claiming here that I'm the C8 or Mid-engine Corvette specialist. You know, like I mentioned, I've seen the leaked images, I've read the articles, but I don't have any kind of insight or secret information to share with you guys. I'll more or less be discussing my takeaways from my experience with the C7 lineup. I currently own a base model C7 Corvette Stingray, as well as I've reviewed all the way up to the Z06 Corvette with the 3LZ trim level and the Z07 performance package. So having an opportunity to experience basically the bottom end of the spectrum with the C7 Corvette all the way up to the top of the current spectrum with the C7 Corvette, I have a few key takeaways and 5 things that I think would really make the C8 or the next generation Corvette the most successful it possibly can. Now I would be making this video about the C7 ZR1, but I think based on the recent leaks that we've seen on that car, it's pretty much ready for production. I think they're just waiting on the perfect time to unveil it. I don't think that there's going to be any drastic changes to the body or the design of the C7 Corvette. Looks like maybe a slightly changed front bumper, a little bit different wing in the rear, and then obviously a higher performance engine, maybe some differences in the brakes and tire setup. But overall, I think that's going to be more of an extension of the C7 than a drastic change and complete remodel like we're anticipating with the C8 Corvette. So let's go ahead and jump in this list, guys. So number one thing I like to see on the C8 Corvette, and I think most of you are expecting this, is a dual clutch transmission. Now, don't get me wrong, the current transmission options in the C7 Corvette are excellent. I've had a chance to spend a little bit of time with both of them. Me owning a Corvette with the automatic A8 transmission, I can say it's a very impressive transmission. The 7-speed manual transmission works great as well, but I do think that if this C8 Corvette is meant to contend with the supercars that we're hearing it's meant to compete with, it's going to need a faster transmission, especially for manual shifting with the paddles. So we're hearing a lot of speculation that they may actually be doing away with a manual transmission altogether, going to a automatic transmission, and if that's the case, it has to be extremely fast and not only automatic mode but also while shifting with the paddles. The current automatic 8-speed transmission works great in automatic mode, but when you try to use the paddles, there's a lot of delay there. It's still fun, but it's just not quite on par with the supercars that I think the C8 is going to be meant to contend with. So in order to compete in the segment that I believe this car will be competing in, it's going to have lightning fast shifts with the paddles or an automatic mode. I did recently review the Camaro ZL1 with its new 10-speed automatic transmission. That transmission shifts really fast. I think that would be a welcome addition to the C8 Corvette. Or Tremec, the same company that makes the 7-speed manual transmission for the current C7 generation, they have recently released a dual clutch transmission design that some have speculated will make its way to the C8 Corvette. So either way, I think that they've got the right tools and they'll use the proper transmission. But I'd love to see a dual clutch transmission that would compete with, say, the PDK transmissions in the Porsches or things of that nature. I think that it would definitely improve the overall experience of driving the car, make it a little more interactive. I have no doubt that the engine will be plenty powerful, but we want to make sure that it's making its way to the wheels in the most efficient way possible. Next thing I want to talk about is active aero and dive planes. Now, we've actually seen some recent leaked rumors or some patents pending that GM is working on an active aero system right now, and the leaked images actually show a C7 Corvette. So you never know, we may actually see this active aero technology on the C7 Corvette or ZR1 Corvette, that is. But basically this technology consists of an adjustable front splitter, an adjustable rear spoiler, as well as adjustable ride height to actually maximize on the aerodynamics of the car. We're seeing this a lot with especially supercars and hypercars, where they're utilizing different aerodynamic elements to basically stick the car to the ground at high speeds and taking it beyond just using great suspension or beyond just using great tires. They're actually using the air as a component to keep the car glued to the ground. And active aero seems to be more and more popular these days and becoming a more and more essential part of a highly track-focused car and performance-oriented car. And I think the dive planes, they are just a really cool element and also increase performance. I don't know if there's going to be different variants of the C8 Corvette like we're seeing now, like maybe a C8 Z06 and C8 ZR1 or Grand Sport, or if it'll just be a single model C8 and that's it. It's tough to tell at this point in time, but I think if there is a track-focused variant, I'd really like to see some really aggressive dive planes straight from the factory, which we haven't seen on a Corvette before, but we are seeing it on cars cars like the Viper ACR or the Camaro ZL1 1LE. Some people may not like the way that this looks on the car, but I think it's a really cool element, and it just adds an extra level of aggression to the car, as well as keeps that front end super planted to the ground. I think it would be a welcome addition. Next thing I want to talk about for number 3, it actually ties in directly with the active aero and the dive planes, and that's a front end lift. Now, the reason I bring this up, I think that as we get more and more advanced aerodynamics and the car becomes lower and lower to the ground, we're going to see, especially with a Corvette, people like to drive these cars. They're not some of the super expensive exotic supercars that are just stashed in a garage for, always. These cars are driven very often, and I think in order to keep the Corvette somewhat practical, if the C8 is going to have a very low ride height and very advanced active aero, it's really important that this has a front end lift system in order to help you get over the bumps. We see a lot of supercars already equipped with this system that allow the front end to lift up to help you get over speed bumps or curbs in the road, things like that are just high enough to scrape that front splitter. Even on the current Z06, especially if you get up into the Z07 performance package, I was actually looking in, even for an aftermarket one, you could be looking at well over $1,000 to replace that front splitter if you damage it. So having a front end lift system on the C8 Corvette I think is going to be essential, because there's no telling how expensive a front splitter could be if it has any kind of active components in there. So I'd really like to see how that's implemented, and basically give Corvette drivers, especially that of the C8, just that much more peace of mind to take this car out, drive it on public roads, and not worry about just completely folding their front splitter up underneath the car if they're going to hit a bump or a shift in the road, things like that. Next thing I want to talk about for number 4 is line lock. Now, I've talked about this feature actually in my Mustang GT review. There's a couple models out there. The Camaro ZL1 has it. All of the 2018 Mustangs are going to have it, and there's a lot of other cars that have this feature as well. But I think as the braking technology becomes more and more advanced in these cars, there's a high probability that the C8 will come with a huge rotors, carbon ceramic rotors, and really powerful calipers. I think as that becomes the standard on these cars, it becomes more and more damaging to the drivetrain to just lock up the brakes and hold down the gas to a burnout. Now, whether that's for you're at the drag strip trying to heat up your tires, or you're at a car show trying to show off, I think that it's important that a line lock feature be installed, because I can't imagine it would be that expensive, and Corvettes haven't come equipped with them in the past. But with, say, for a model like the C8, if the engine's mounted in the rear, all that weight on the back, I'm assuming it'd have really wide tires. I think having a line lock is going to reduce that much more damage on the drivetrain when you're trying to do a burnout for whatever reason. I'm not a big burnout guy, but I think having a line lock, it just gives you that much more control and safety of doing a burnout without damaging all your components. So I think that would be a really welcome addition to really any Corvette at this point, but especially the C8, being that it's supposed to compete with these supercars and have such an exotic overall setup. And the last thing that I want to talk about are number 5. This is more or less something that I've thought of. It doesn't impact performance at all, but I think that it should have a roof latch notification system. So what I mean by that, and I've actually talked about this in a previous video about the 5 things you should never do to a Corvette, and that's to forget to latch your roof properly. Sorry, I can't quite get that out, guys. But the problem with the coupe design on the Corvette, it does have a removable roof, which is a great feature. A lot of people love this feature, and I think it's a fantastic option. But I've kind of talked about in the past how it's very easy to forget to latch the roof. Now, I've personally never forgotten to latch the roof on my C6 or my C7, but there are many people that have. There's actually a club, people call it the Flying Roof Club, if I'm not mistaken. But a lot of people have forgotten to latch these roofs properly, and the fact that these cars can warn you of so much, it's going to ding like crazy if you forget your seatbelt. It's going to warn you if your tire pressure is low. It's going to warn you if your engine temperature is too high. There are so many warnings and so much advanced technology in these cars of what it can warn you and what it can tell you about. I just think it's kind of crazy at this point, going into say 2019 or 2020, if the Corvette still isn't able to notify the driver that the roof is unlatched or latched. Obviously it could be a relatively non-invasive indication. It could just pop up and notify you that the roof is off. You select OK. You're free to drive as long as you want with the top off without being bothered by it. When every time you start the car up again, it notifies you again. But I just think that's something at this point that we need. And it sounds silly. I got a lot of hate comments of people saying, who would be stupid enough to forget to latch the roof? But it happens, guys. And if this C8 Corvette is meant to start in the 6-figure range, I think that the buyers of this car, who knows? It may not appeal to them at all, but I think it's finally time where the technology is advanced enough where it'd be really inexpensive to build some kind of sensor or some kind of option in there where it could just notify you if the latches aren't closed all the way properly, or if the roof is off altogether. So that way you're able to, you know, enjoy the car and not worry about the roof ever blowing off and damaging. I would imagine a roof panel on a car like this, especially if they end up going with something exotic like a carbon fiber roof panel or a transparent roof panel, it's going to be well over $2,000 to $3,000, maybe even more. Never mind the damage it could do to the car while it's flying off, or the car behind you, that if it hits a person or anything. So I think it's essential that we have some kind of notification system on the future generations of Corvettes that the roof is not installed properly. But that's just my 2 cents, guys. You know, some people could disagree. I think it would be a valuable and worthwhile feature. But let me know in the comments if you disagree with any of these, or if you have anything to add that you think should be a part of the C8 Corvette. Obviously, there could be much more that I could list in this video, and there may be some things that you don't think should be on there, and they should you know, keep what they've got going on the C7 Corvette for the C8. But let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you guys. Give it a like if you enjoyed this video, and if you're new to the channel, definitely think about subscribing. I've got a lot of different car content primarily based on Corvettes. I'd love to have you in as addition to the channel. But thanks for watching, guys. This is it for today.